All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Monday, everybody. Hope all of you guys had a great weekend. We got a jam-packed show for you today. I wanted to be able to bounce all around the league because there's so many different teams that we need to hit on. And so I came up with a format today. We're going to do stock rising or stock falling. I'm basically going to hit on a team and tell you guys whether or not I'm feeling better about them compared to before the season or worse about them compared to before the season. And then at the tail end of the show, we're going to have an episode of Timpf's Tape where I have 18 clips. We're going to be bouncing around the league for that as well. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. And then keep dropping mailbag questions in those YouTube comments so we keep hitting them throughout the remainder of the season. All right, let's talk some basketball. So a little disclaimer off the top. This is all very small sample size stuff, right? Like, it's only been 2 or 3 games for most of these teams. So obviously a lot can change over the course of even just the next week for any of these teams. But this is what we have. This is what we have to work with to try to evaluate these teams. So obviously we're going to have, we're going to try to find what we can learn within the small sample size, but let's also just keep in mind that it's not the end all be all, certainly not this early in the season. Like for instance, the Lakers, they're 3-0. That doesn't mean they're the 2017 Warriors. Just means they're off to a good start. Good teams can go on runs where they win a couple of games in a row against other good teams. It's about sustained excellence that separates you, right? The Nuggets, the Sixers, and the Bucks, 3 teams that are all in my top 10 championship contenders, are 2-6 to start the year. Doesn't mean the sky is falling for them either. There's lots of things that could turn positively for them. So remember, let's just kind of keep that small sample size kind of disclaimer in the back of our minds as we're looking forward. But let's start with first team today, stock rising, the Boston Celtics. Their last 2 games, they blew out Washington, and they ended up in a kind of a tough game in Detroit. They were down by 6 with about 4 minutes left, but then they just went on this like vintage Boston Celtics run. They generated a wide open 3 for Drew Holiday where Al Horford screened for Tatum. But like we've talked about so much on the show, when teams are switching, if you're setting the screen, you want to screen on the bottom side. Horford screened on the bottom side and slipped. Tatum threw him an easy pass, formed a 2-on-1 on the weak side, kick out pass to Drew Holiday, knocks down a 3. Very next possession, Jaylen Brown, just a beautiful transition drive, gets into the lane. All hell breaks loose around him, but he makes an amazing kick out pass to the right wing. Swing, another wide open 3 for Drew Holiday. He knocks it down. Next possession, Jayson Tatum's trying to come off of an off-ball screen, but Tim Hardaway Jr. is top-blocking him. And instead of trying to force his way through the screen, he just cuts to the post, and now he's got inside position because Tim Hardaway Jr. is on his top side trying to top block, gets a quick post up, gets an easy bucket, and then Tatum ices the game with a little ISO jumper in the left short corner versus Jaden Ivey. While on the other end of the floor, just smothering defense, Drew Holiday gets a steal in transition on Jaden Ivey. There's this crazy play where Cade Cunningham breaks open on a backdoor cut. Looks like he's going to get a dunk, and in comes Derek White just flying in and gets a block. And by the way, there's going to be a lot of nights like that for the Boston Celtics. There's going to be nights where they beat the shit out of you. Then there's going to be nights where they're in these tougher spots. And to me, it's always a sign of a great team in the regular season when you just find a way to win on the nights when it doesn't necessarily look great. And that, what I just broke down for you, it's 4 really good offensive possessions in a row and 4 stops. And bam, you got yourself a win in a game that it looked like you had a decent chance of losing. And again, those to me are like big characteristics of teams that are serious about trying to repeat, that are serious about trying to build championship habits over the course of the season. They got out of there with a win. So far, they're 3-0. They're number 1 in offense with a 129 offensive rating. Their paint defense is getting shredded a little bit, but that's to be expected. They're only playing a starting caliber center for about 26 minutes a night, smartly keeping Horford's minutes down so he doesn't get worn down. They're also really overplaying the three-point line, which is going to lead to some more paint scoring. They're allowing just 14.7 wide open threes per game. That's with a defender at least 6 feet away. That's the 3rd best mark in the league. Overall, they're 15th in defense, which is fine. You also have to factor in there's a couple of massive blowouts in there, and that just means there's going to be a lot of stretches of the game where there's very little urgency. So that's going to hurt your defensive numbers as well. But we all expected the Celtics to start 3-0. So why am I saying their stock is rising? It's because Jayson Tatum has looked absolutely amazing to start the season. 33 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. 55% from the field, 49% from 3. The jump shooting is absurd. He's taken 40 jump shots so far this season, made 20 of them. He's 16 for 34 off the dribble. That's 47% overall, 1.32 points per attempt. Now, obviously, he's not going to shoot that well for the entire season because nobody shoots it, not even Steph Curry shoots that well for the entire season. But if he can stay remotely close, that's a fundamentally different type of star, a fundamentally different type of player than the guy who was still really damn good, who was the best player on a championship team last year. His shot creation has been completely like off the charts. He's ran 72 ISOs, pick and rolls, and post-ups, including passes that have generated 114 points. That's 1.58 points per possession. That's like completely absurd, guys. They were already the best team in the league last year with a lesser version of Jayson Tatum. The guy that we had last year was a very versatile defender, very good playmaker, but he was an inconsistent jump shooter and an inconsistent rim finisher. This year, he just seems to have tightened up specifically that jump shot piece to such a crazy level. It's unlocked so much more of his playmaking. If he rises to the ranks of the super duper stars like the Jokic, Luka tier, if he gets up into that tier, we might as well just skip ahead to June when he's got the finals MVP trophy in his hands. Because I don't know how anybody's going to beat this team if they don't have an advantage in that like best player on the team category, which used to be the one thing that teams would look at. It's like, if we end up in a series with Boston, at least we have Luka Doncic, and even that wasn't even enough. But if Jayson Tatum's going to go toe-to-toe with the best players in the league and be at that level, nobody's beating these guys 4 times out of 7. The Celtics have 5 different rotation players right now that are shooting at least 40% from 3 on at least 4 attempts per game. They look like a well-oiled machine. How could you not be higher on them, even than what we thought going into the season? Stock falling, the Celtics competition out in the Eastern Conference. The Knicks, they had a nice bounce-back win against the Pacers, or another team that's off to a rough start. We'll be talking about them later on in the show. They had 4 starters score 20-plus points, got 1.36 points per jump shot in that game. So a nice little bounce-back game. They defended super well. They gave Tyrese Haliburton a nightmare game. But as we saw on opening night, they're just miles away from Boston right now. The Sixers, they got a big win in Indy, kind of a weird game. The Indy had a late lead. They kind of combusted down the stretch. Tyrese Haliburton somehow ends up sinking like a double pump 3 to send it to OT, but then the Sixers end up winning in OT. But they also in that game, one last shout out, Andre Drummond had a couple of huge defensive plays at the end of regulation where he was coming up to the level of the screen and just being active with his hands on the ball handler. I think he got a strip on Nembhard and then another strip on Tyrese Haliburton. 2 huge stops at the end of the game that gave him a really good chance to win. But they're 1-2. And Paul George and Joel Embiid are still not healthy and not on the floor together. So it's hard not to be at least a little bit discouraged by that. And then the Bucks, they follow up their impressive win against Philly to start the season with 2 really ugly losses at home to the Chicago Bulls and then on the road in Brooklyn. Same issue in both games. A lot of limited defensive personnel on the floor in these lineups. Like, their starting lineup has been okay. They played 115 possessions. They have a 116 offensive rating. They have a 111 defensive rating. That's +5 net. That's fine. Obviously, you want it to be better. You want Dame and Giannis-led units to just wax everybody. That needs to be like, and they did last year. Dame and Giannis-led units were, I want to say, over 10, over +10 in net rating. So they were good last year, but they're not playing too well to start the year. But it's the bench units that have been rough. Anything with Bobby Portis on the floor has been really difficult to deal with defensively. He's just lost all over the place. Last night in the Brooklyn game, they just completely got annihilated in that early stretch of the fourth quarter. And Pat Connaughton was the guy they were going at every time. Dennis Schroeder and Cam Thomas were just going at Pat every single time. He had this really ugly play where there was a defensive rebound that was right in his face. Like, he should have grabbed it. And somehow he didn't grab it, and then committed a flagrant foul on Dennis Schroeder. So it went from should have been Bucks ball to now now the Nets are shooting 2 free throws and they get the ball back. He just had an absolute disaster shift to start the fourth quarter. All of those bench units, they're just incredibly slow. They're not getting enough production out of them. And then when the starters came back, and they just have these effort issues, like one of the first possessions after Dame checks back in the game in the fourth quarter, he gives up a tip dunk in the left corner because he's not boxing out, and the man just runs right by him and gets a tip dunk. It just seems like there's that same funk that kind of sat over this team last year, where they just seemed like they could lose on any given night to any given team, is still there. And you know how it goes. Like, then they'll turn around and beat the shit out of a good team 2 nights later. But it's kind of just a bizarre vibe that kind of centers around that team. And to me, it really comes down to the athleticism piece. And we were hoping that Gary Trent and DeLon Wright would kind of help address this a little bit. But when you're slow and you're old, the league is super athletic now. And with these younger teams, like if you bring poor effort, or if you play lineups that have a bunch of slow-footed guys, like you're just going to get killed. And so like as we look back and we look at how Philly looks right now, we look at how Milwaukee looks right now, we look at how the Knicks look right now, we look at how the Pacers look right now, it's hard not to feel extremely confident if you're in that Boston Celtics locker room or if you're a Boston Celtics fan that they're not going to get back to the finals, because just everybody else is stumbling out of the gate and the Celtics are whooping everybody's ass, and they ended up in one close game and they just turned into an unbeatable half-court machine in the final few minutes of the game and they got out of there with the win. So definitely stock falling for the Eastern Conference competition for the Boston Celtics. Stock rising, the Los Angeles Lakers. The Western Conference gave them a brutal schedule to start the year. They played the Minnesota Timberwolves and then the Suns and the Kings back-to-back. They ended up going 3-0, once again on the strength of their offense, which is something I talked about coming into the season. That was what made them so good at the tail end of the year last year. Remember, from basically their last 46 games of the season, they were the third best offense in all of basketball. They had a 120 offensive rating through that first 3 games of the season. That's 4th in the league. Again, obviously small sample. A 106 offensive rating in the half court, according to Cleaning the Glass. That's also an awesome number. That was 4th in the NBA. Ironically, though, with all the talk about them shooting more threes and everything I talked about in preseason and everything about JJ Redick, here they're in real games and they've kind of stylistically just landed on the same type of offensive approach as last year, which is like everything's in the paint and then taking wide open threes out of it. They're 28th in 3-point attempts per 100 possessions, so they're not generating a ton of threes, yet they're still a top 5 offense, which again is what I talk about all the time. It doesn't matter if you shoot threes, it's just who can get the most high quality shots. The Lakers don't shoot a ton of threes, but they're scoring a lot because they're number 1 in points in the paint per 100 possessions with a 5-point lead over the second place team. The Lakers butcher teams in the paint. That is where they drive the majority of their offensive success. So that's what's kind of funny is like they went from, oh, we're going to shoot more threes, blah, blah, blah. And now they're just playing the same way they did last year. Now, there are a couple of major changes to the way that they are actually going about that paint to great attack on offense. One, they have switched some of their lineup configurations. So in the past, they used to pair Austin with LeBron and D'Lo with AD because D'Lo is a better playmaker. And when LeBron's off the floor, you need playmaking, right? And the Austin-LeBron 2-man game has been really good. So that was kind of the driving force behind that configuration in the past. This year, they flipped it. Now Austin's running with AD and D'Lo's running with LeBron. It feels counterintuitive for the short term, right? Because D'Lo is legitimately someone that in the large sample last year just looked like a better fit with AD. But I like the idea of investing in the Austin AD pairing because I do think that we are going to finally get that D'Angelo Russell trade this year. So the future of this team is Austin and AD units with LeBron off the floor, those units needing to float themselves. They're about -2 per LeBron off, AD on lineups right now are -2 per 100 possessions in the early going. Which is not bad. They're floating around even. That's okay. Again, look, this team has always had big splits with LeBron on and off the floor. So if they can hover around even with LeBron off, I think that's a win. But that's the main difference in the way that they're pairing the lineups. The other big change is how often they're playing through AD. He's got a 30% usage rate. That's the highest he's had since he's come to the Lakers. He's shooting 19 field goal attempts per game. That's the highest since he's come to the Lakers. So a lot more usage for Anthony Davis. And he's been on an absolute tear. Like if you're asking like who are the standout players in the league, like the guys that have just been absolutely shredding everybody to start the season in the small sample, it's Jayson Tatum and Anthony Davis. Those are the 2 guys that have been kicking everybody's ass to start this particular. Ironically, number 6 and number 7 on my player rankings come into the season that have been the most impressive. He had completely dominated the Wolves game. He had 36 and 16. Totally took that game over in the second half. He had 20 in the second half against Phoenix, too. A lot of late game surges from Anthony Davis. Then he hit the biggest shot of the game against Sacramento, a pick and pop 3 over Domantas Sabonis, had another 30-point night in that one. He's been a monster on defense in every single game, playing like the best player in the league right now. He's 34 points and 11 rebounds per game with 4 steals and blocks a game on 67% true shooting. LeBron got off to a somewhat slow start as he eased his way into things this season, but then he had that crazy run at the start of the fourth quarter of the Kings game. I think he had like 16 points in 3 minutes as he turned what probably should have been a loss into a win. He's at 23 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists on 61% true shooting. Austin and Rui have both been excellent. They're getting 35 points per game out of those 2 guys, and they're both defending well to start the year. But the main reason why my stock is rising slightly with the Lakers is the encouraging stuff from their bench groups. They are dominating the minutes with Anthony Davis on the bench so far. They are plus 50 in 64 possessions with AD on the bench. And that was, again, over the years when AD is hurt or when AD's out, they've struggled to put together kind of like coherent lineups. Hasn't been the case so far this year, all because of the play of Dalton Knecht and Jackson Hayes in terms of guys producing off the bench. As we went into the season, if you guys remember, I talked about depth being the main issue for this Laker team. The starters are good. That Austin, D'Lo, Rui, LeBron, AD, that lineup's good. They're gonna win a lot of their minutes with that particular unit, right? Gabe Vincent is a solid backup guard. Vando, when he's healthy, is a solid backup forward. But beyond that, and Vando's got his own health issues, everything's a question mark. It's like Max Christie's very young. Is he going to be able to produce? Dalton Knecht's a rookie. Is he going to be able to produce? Jackson Hayes is a player with some really big weaknesses. Is he going to be able to produce? Like, who's going to be able to produce from this bench group? And the two guys that have really stood out so far is Dalton Knecht and Jackson Hayes. Dalton Knecht has been great so far. He's brought this like aggressive movement shooting. He's flying off of screens and looking to shoot right away. He's making good reads when he's coming off the screens. He brings real downhill athleticism in transition. Hasn't really stuck out as a bad piece on defense yet, although I think he will have some ugly moments there in the large sample. And then Jackson Hayes, he's finishing really well on cuts and rolls. He's 6 for 7 from the field on cuts and rolls. He has 5 offensive rebounds. He's been active on the glass, still fouling at an absurd rate, 6.1 fouls per 36 minutes. But he's been really solid so far too. And so they've been able to hold their own with AD on the bench. The other big exciting thing is the early returns on the JJ Redick coaching process. They look incredibly sharp on both ends of the floor. One of the big things that, before we get into some of the specifics, JJ is actively coaching, and this is something that I begged for last year. Darvin Ham got made fun of all the time for having his hands in his pockets. They called him hot pockets. They made all these jokes about it. But it was less about the body language and more about the fact that, like, what are you doing to help your team win the game? Like, the players are out there doing everything they can to win the game. Yes, I get it. You did whatever you did before the game in terms of game plan and preparation and scouting and all that sort of stuff. Now we're in the game, though. What are you doing to help the team win on a possession by possession during the game? JJ is super active on the sideline, talking to the refs all the time, talking to the players all the time, talking about schematic adjustments he can make over the course of the game, emphasizing game plan details that are not being executed, positively reinforcing game plan details that are getting executed. He is active on the sidelines, and it's leading to a lot more organization on a possession-by-possession basis. Their offensive organization in general was already pretty solid last year, but it's gone up a level. We're getting 2 or 3 beautiful after timeout plays every single game. Really smart concepts that are getting their best players going with an advantage. The defensive organization has been really exciting so far. Their game plans have been smart, very nicely curated to each specific opponent they're playing. They're doing a much better job of chasing teams off the three-point line than they did last year. They're performing well on the margins, too. That's a big coaching piece. They're rebounding well on both ends. Last year, they were not a good offensive rebounding team. They're forcing more turnovers and scoring on them. Last year, that just was not a margin for them. They're taking really good care of the basketball now. Like, they just look like a really well-coached team. Now, does that mean I think that they're suddenly a top-tier contender? No, of course not. They still have their personnel limitations. We saw their personnel limitations in the Sacramento game. They should have lost to Sacramento. The same issues that they've always had with Sacramento came up in that second half. AD really struggles to handle Sabonis just because Sabonis is stronger and quicker than him. And then 2, the guards for Sacramento are so fast. And the athleticism for the guard core for the Lakers is one of the biggest weaknesses on that roster. And so when they turned up the pressure, when they turned up the pace, when Sabonis started going at AD, the wheels kind of came off and the Lakers really lost control of that game. LeBron just stole it. LeBron came in the fourth quarter and led a 21-0 run and stole that game. Like, the Lakers still have their personnel limitations. The difference is because they're well coached now, they have a little bit more ability to pull out that type of game. That's the hallmark of what makes a team different. This team different from last year's team. You have 2 top 10 players and you're well coached. That will allow you to cover for some of your weaknesses in the large sample. It's a big part of why I said before the season, I think this is a 50-win team if they stay healthy, if LeBron and AD both play at least, 65, 70 games, because the infrastructure is better now than it used to be. But yeah, if they want to win the Western Conference, they're going to have to upgrade D'Angelo Russell into a really good athlete that can play both ends of the floor at the 2. Because when you get into the smaller sample, all of a sudden your personnel weaknesses get much harder to hide. But heading into a tough 5-game road trip now, they're at Phoenix, they're at Cleveland, at Toronto, at Detroit, at Memphis. We're going to learn a lot more about this team over the course of that stretch. I think 3-2 would be a huge win for the Lakers. If they got back into LA at 6-2, I think that's a really nice start to this season. I don't think they're world beaters. I don't think they're in that top tier contender tier. I don't think their personnel is good enough, but they're sharp. And sharp teams can win games in the regular season, and that's what they've done to start the year. So shout out to JJ Redick. Does your favorite NBA player have what it takes to be crowned king of the court? Find out at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. DraftKings is offering $1 million a day in bonus bets for the first 10 days of the NBA season. That's $10 million in bonus bets. Here's how you shoot your shot. Opt in and get a daily NBA profit boost token. Pick a pregame NBA player prop to boost, and if that player leads the league that night in points plus rebounds plus assists, you win a share of the $1 million in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS to win a share of $1 million in bonus bets if your player is king of the court. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. All right, let's be real. There's a food you're probably eating right now that's killing your testosterone, draining your energy, and wrecking your focus and sex drive. And the crazy part, the food is advertised as healthy. Tons of guys are eating it every day because they think it'll help them burn fat and build muscle. But here's the shocking truth. It's doing the exact opposite. Even if you only eat this food every once in a while, it's enough to devastate your testosterone, leaving you feeling weaker, more unmotivated, and struggling in the gym, at work, or even in the bedroom. And trust me, it's not just your age or genetics holding you back, it's this one unexpected food. Here's the thing. This food is so common that most guys don't even realize how much damage it's causing. But there's a simple way to avoid it. And our friends at V-Shred have created a powerful video that reveals exactly what this healthy food is, this healthy food, and how cutting it out can transform your body, helping you build muscle, lose fat, and boost your energy. So if you want to know what this testosterone-killing food is and how to avoid it, head over to sculptnation.com/hoops. Again, that's sculptnation.com/hoops to watch the video or to click on the link below. This could be the game changer you've been looking for. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. Stock falling, the Denver Nuggets 0-2 out the gates after a super disappointing loss at home to the Los Angeles Clippers. Once again, Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, and Aaron Gordon just not providing any offensive pop for this team. They are combined 28 for 79 from the field for only 80 points so far this season. Jokic looks amazing. He completely dominated the Clippers game when he was on the floor, and his three-point shot looks great. So, if you're looking for silver linings as a Denver Nuggets fan, there are two main things that I look at. One, Christian Brown looks like a great replacement for KCP with the starters. You've won his minutes in both games. He's been a positive. He's been super active as a screener and cutter. He's actually producing more points per game individually than Michael Porter Jr., which is obviously a negative on Michael Porter Jr. that he's got to figure out. But the second piece of that is that's legitimate production for a guy that we all think is a limited offensive player. So far, he's been in double figures both games. So he's been productive. He's been doing his job. He's a more versatile defender than KCP. And by the way, KCP is off to kind of a rough start in Orlando. Now, I think KCP will be fine in the long run. He's going to hit shots. It's a new team for him, too. A lot of different things he's got to figure out, not getting the same types of opportunities. But as of right now, the Christian Brown swap in for KCP with the starters has looked like a move that was somewhat savvy by the front office. The second big kind of upside, the second big silver lining if you're a Nuggets fan is Jokic's jump shot looks great. He had 7 threes against the Clippers. He's 8 for 15 from 3 on the season. As I've talked about so much, that's such an important part of his game. The pick and pop is a great way for Jokic to generate offense without having to work as hard as he does when he works closer to the basket. Not just for shooting threes, but driving closeouts where he can then weaponize his playmaking ability. It's just an important part of what is a ceiling raiser for Jokic. I've said this before, but Jokic as a mediocre to inconsistent three-point shooter is the best player in the league. Jokic with an elite three-point shot is the best player in the league by a mile. That is the big differentiator for him. Obviously, only 2 games, very small sample, but that to me is a super encouraging start to the season for Nikola Jokic. The other starters, though, Those are the two silver linings. Everything else for the Nuggets has been an absolute tire fire. Obviously, Aaron Gordon, Jamal Murray, and Michael Porter Jr. have been bad, but that's especially extending into the bench units. When they get to the stretches of the game when Jokic is off the floor, they are falling apart to a much greater extent than they did in years past, and on a very, very basic level, on a per 100 possessions basis this season. In years past, they've hovered around minus 11. So when Jokic is off, they lose those minutes by about 11 points per 100 possessions. This year so far, again, only 2 games, they're losing those minutes by 43.3 points per 100 possessions. That is untenable. And it's because when you're staggering starters with bench players and the starters aren't playing well and the guys that you're bringing in off the bench that you're needing to provide firepower aren't playing well, you're not going to get anything out of them, right? Like Julian Strawther, he's hit some shots, but Peyton Watson and Julian Strawther combined have scored 17 points through 2 games. That's not firepower. That's not a contribution. Russell Westbrook. Some of this is part of the Russell Westbrook experience, right? Like I said before the start of the year, Russell Westbrook has a higher ceiling than Reggie Jackson for sure, but he has a much lower floor. The bad Russ games are so damaging. And you got 2 bad Russ games to start the year. He's 2 for 18 from the field, 1 for 9 from 3. A lot of the usual Russ mistakes where he's missing box outs, bad off-ball defense. The Nuggets are minus 37 in 40 minutes of game time that Russell Westbrook has played. That's a total disaster. Now, to be clear, Russ's ceiling is way higher than Reggie Jackson's. There will be many games this year where Russ is awesome, and there will be a few times where you win a game because of Russ. So Nuggets fans, it's not all like this. There's going to be good times, but this is part of the experience. The Russ experience is wild oscillations back and forth between downright damaging and impressively good. And that's kind of the experience. That's why, like Reggie Jackson, you're not going to get the highs, but the floor is a little bit higher. And like, that's the thing. Like it just, that's the one part of like making this type of move is it just comes with a lot of volatility that comes with it. You almost, if you're Michael Malone, you almost hope by the end of the year that it turns more into like a let's see if Russ has it tonight thing. And if Russ comes out and he's sloppy and undisciplined and not paying attention, maybe you bail on him for that game and give him a longer leash in games where he's sharper and he has it going. But like he's been pretty bad to start the year. And as a result, there's been 24 minutes of Nuggets basketball with Jokic on the bench and they're minus 18. So they're just hemorrhaging leads when Jokic is on the bench. So the other thing with the backup, with the bench units is Dario Saric has just been actually really bad on both ends of the floor, like getting cooked on defense, not providing anything on offense. Saric is a good player. I think he'll be fine in the long run, but he's not off to a good start. So here's the deal. Are the Nuggets this bad? Obviously not. Michael Porter Jr. will play better. Jamal Murray will play better. Jamal Murray in particular kind of has a habit of coming into the seasons out of shape and playing his way into shape, right? Nikola Jokic is still the best player in the world. And Mike Malone is a good coach who will patchwork together a bench that at least isn't completely terrible, right? They'll find a footing. But at this point, they don't look even close to the favorite to win the conference that I said they were before the season started. Now, I never thought they were going to get the 1 seed or anything. I thought they'd be above the play-in. I thought they'd be in that like 2, 3, 4, 5 range. But like I picked them to win the conference. They don't look like a team that can win 3 playoff series at this point. They look far away from that. So again, small sample. We'll see. But it's hard not to be at least a little bit discouraged with how the Nuggets look to this point. Also, Nuggets fans, I'm going on with Adam Mares from DNVR tomorrow on his All-NBA podcast to talk about the entire league, but I'm sure we'll be talking a lot of Nuggets. So make sure if you guys follow Adam, keep an eye out for that particular episode. Stock rising, Evan Mobley. He's averaging 18 points and 9 rebounds here in the early going. He's hit 3 threes in 7 attempts, doing a lot more work on the ball. His usage rate in the first 3 years of his career was right around 20%. This year so far, obviously in small sample, usage rate of 25%. So a substantial increase in how much he's involved in the offense. The main thing is he's run 12 ball screens so far. That's 4 per game. He ran less than 1 ball screen per game last year, 0.7 ball screens per game last year. So they're going to a legitimate change in their offensive approach to give Evan Mobley more touches with the ball in his hands starting from the perimeter. Now, these are inverted ball screens, right? Inverted ball screens function in a unique way for two reasons. One, the guy guarding Mobley is typically a bigger forward. Bigger forwards typically don't spend a lot of time in their career navigating screens. And so they are big targets. If you set a good screen on them, you can get them caught on them, right? That's the first half of what makes inverted ball screens hard to guard. The second piece of it is guards don't spend a lot of time operating as the screen defender in ball screens. Usually it's the inverse, right? They're the guy chasing the guard over the top. They're really good at navigating screens, but they don't know how to help when their man screens as well as forwards do. It's inverted ball screen. It's literally an inversion of defensive responsibilities. And when you invert defensive responsibilities, you start to make people do things that they're not comfortable with. And so they're getting a lot of really good stuff out of it. They're getting 1 point per possession so far through the 12 attempts. We're seeing a couple of different specific dynamics take place. One, the forward is typically ducking underneath the pick. So when he ducks underneath the pick, Evan Mobley can either one, take a pull-up jump shot, which he's been shooting his pull-up jump shot pretty well to start the year, or two, it's a runway. If he goes underneath the screen, now there's a gap between Evan and the defender who went underneath the screen. So he can attack, get downhill. He's got a head of steam before he runs into the defender, which he can then turn into, momentum that he can get closer to the basket for an easier shot. The second piece of that is when the guard screens for Evan Mobley, in many cases, the other guard will linger or help. In cases like this, Evan Mobley can use it as an opportunity to get the defense in rotation. There was a layup that Donovan Mitchell got on a inverted ball screen where Mitchell went to go screen for him. Evan went downhill. Mitchell's man followed him on the hedge. There was two on the ball, kicked it back to Mitch. Hard closeout. Mitch beat him off the dribble, got into the basket for a layup. That's a really, really interesting wrinkle to this offense that I'd love to see continue to develop over the course of the season. He's still struggling a little bit with short range finishing. That's always been a weakness of his in his career. He's just 6 for 18 on floaters, hooks, and layups so far, but the jump shooting piece is super encouraging. Remember, guys, Evan Mobley's development is the number one swing factor in everything Cleveland is trying to accomplish in this era. If he becomes an all-star level player, we're looking at a contender in the last few years. If he doesn't, this team isn't going anywhere. So it's hard not to be at least a little encouraged by the growth that we're finally starting to see out of Evan Mobley. Stock falling, Tyrese Haliburton, 12 points per game and less than 4 assists per game on 39% true shooting to start the year. Had a 0-point night against the New York Knicks the other day. He's really struggling to put the ball in the basket himself on the ball. And that is the issue because it is the give and take of every playmaker, right? You have to demonstrate you're a threat to score to warp the defense. If you warp the defense, that unlocks your playmaking. And when one of those elements is failing you, it's just like for really good scorers that don't see the floor well. If you don't pass the ball well enough to loosen up the defense on you, you're not going to get the opportunities in single coverage you need to actually score the basketball. It's a give and take, right? He's shooting just 5 for 19 as the ball handler in pick and roll when he takes shots, just 5 for 19. He's just 7 for 30 on jump shots. He's just 5 for 21 on off the dribble jump shots. And he has 6 total made shots at the rim in 3 games. And so this is then turning into a trickle-down effect where it's starting to affect his playmaking, which has been non-existent to start the year. And the worst part about it is he's starting to look a little bit like he has the yips. He's had some bad body language. The end of that Sixers game, there were these like close-up shots of his face after he'd make a mistake where he looks kind of like flabbergasted. Like he's just kind of in a weird spot. He had this really weird play at the end of regulation where he was coming off of a ball screen on the right wing, and Andre Drummond was up at the level and right in his face, and he just like wasn't paying attention and exposed the ball out, and Drummond just knocked it out of his hands. Critical turnover at the end of the game. Now he salvaged it. He ended up hitting this crazy like double pump, like prayer 3-point shot to send the game to OT, but they ended up losing in OT anyway. And like, he's just the engine that makes this whole thing go. And like, he's had moments, he had some good playoff games last year. He had some good stretches at the end of last year, but he just hasn't been able to like really reach the level he was at before he hurt his hamstring. And that's concerning because the guy before he hurt his hamstring looked like a guy who was on a like legit star trajectory, like superstar trajectory. That's how good he was averaging 14 assists per game, 50, 40, 90 guy, leading one of the best offenses in the league. He looked like like a transcendently great player in the making, and then he pulls his hammy and he's been something less than that ever since. And again, it's small sample size to start the season, but it's hard not to be, once again, at least a little bit discouraged about how he looks. Stock rising, the Golden State Warriors. But Jason, they just lost to the Clippers. Steph got hurt. Andrew Wiggins and D'Anthony Melton are both having back issues. How could you be higher on them than you were to start the season? Well, for starters, the MRI is back on Steph, and it appears to be super mild. It looks like he's going to be reevaluated on Friday, so I doubt they lose him for more than a week or so, right? So not too worried about Steph. The injuries to D'Anthony Melton and Andrew Wiggins both appear to be somewhat mild as well, so I'm not super concerned there. But the main thing is the depth has bared out in a way that shows the Warriors have a much higher floor than all of us anticipated going into the season, which makes them more well-positioned to be aggressive than they were last year. The additions that they made this offseason have given them a deep rotation of solid basketball players, a ton of speed on the perimeter that can cover ground and guard, and then two, lots of guys who can actually do a decent job of generating offense within the Warriors system beyond Steph, right? We talked about Buddy Hield a lot. He's been an absolute shoe-in fit. He had a really nice first half against the Clippers, struggled a little bit in the second half. But like Buddy Hield's had a pretty good start, a really good start to this season. D'Anthony Melton can run action and run it well. Brandon Podziemski can run action and run it well. Obviously, Jonathan Kuminga brings a little bit of that firepower. There's a lot of guys that can run offense for this team and generate quality shots. That combined with their enormous amount of perimeter speed and just overall depth of athletic talent has given them a really high floor. I mean, guys, they beat the shit out of Portland and Utah. They beat Portland and Utah so bad that even after last night's loss, they have the best net rating in basketball right now. That's how high their floor is. That's going to help them win a lot of regular season games. They're going to have a very high win percentage against the bad and mediocre teams in the league compared to the rest of their peers, especially in the Western Conference. That will help them stay afloat in the standings. Now, they still have their top-end talent limitations. Steph has been okay to start the year, but he hasn't produced like a superstar yet. Like, he hasn't had a game with over 20 points in a single game yet. But although I thought he looked fine, like I was watching the Clippers game this morning. In that middle portion of the Clippers game, he went on a flurry where when the Clippers took their first double-digit lead, he went on a flurry where he kind of erased it, where it's like, oh yeah, like Steph is still that guy. You know what I mean? Like it's in there, but then he got hurt, obviously, and that kind of disrupted that momentum from really lasting. But beyond Steph is the issue. Beyond Steph, they have no star-level firepower. Other teams in the West just have more. Let's just look at a real basic level. Who are the second and third options on these Western Conference teams? For the Lakers, it's Austin Reeves and LeBron James. Pretty damn good second and third options. For the Suns, Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. Pretty damn good second and third options. For the Nuggets, Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. They're not even playing well right now, but those are pretty solid second and third options, right? Oklahoma City, Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren. Memphis, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr. Minnesota, Julius Randle and Mike Conley. The Mavs, Kyrie Irving and Klay Thompson. The Kings, DeMar DeRozan and Malik Monk. The Pelicans, DeJounte Murray and Andrew Wiggins. For the Warriors, it's Buddy Hield and Andrew Wiggins. Like that, it's not even close in terms of firepower off the top star compared to the rest of the teams in the West. So that's what's exciting, is like you've got a ton of depth. You've got like 12, 13 guys that are legitimate NBA rotation players. You've got a perfect dude at the top. And you're really good at defense, and you're really well coached, and you just have a super high floor. What that means is you're going to stay afloat in the standings. If you stay afloat in the standings and you've got that kind of depth, because most teams are going to want to go down to an 8 or 9 man rotation by the time they get to the playoffs anyway, right? You can afford to make a consolidation trade. Now, the Warriors have two major weaknesses, in my opinion, in terms of personnel. One, that secondary shot creator. You got to have somebody on this team that is a reliable, dependably good offensive player next to Steph. Like every night, 20-something points. Like you got to have somebody like that on the roster. That's the main target they've got to figure out. The second piece is they're a little bit matchup dependent with their front court. Zubac really did a number on them last night because he's huge. I think he had like 23 points and 18 rebounds. Anthony Davis is always given their front line issues. Jokic, like all these big front lines have a tendency to give the Warriors some issues because they're a little undersized. So they could really use another backup center who's big, like a legitimately big and strong backup center, and they could really use a legitimate secondary shot creator. Well, last year, it just that they weren't good enough in the regular season to actually justify that level of aggression. If they continue to stay afloat in the regular season with this machine that they've got running, and this is where, like, in the depth piece, what brings in the depth is you bring in 3 really good rotation players at discounts this summer. Yeah, you lose Klay Thompson, but you bring in DeAnthony Melton, you bring in Buddy Hield, you bring in Kyle Anderson. You've got the depth to be able to take a few players and package them for somebody else and not have to worry about nuking your own depth. That is what makes me excited about this particular team. They are deeper than they were last year. They have a much higher floor than they had last year. That will keep them afloat in the regular season and gives them more flexibility to make some sort of trade. To put it really simple, going into the season, I didn't think that they were. I didn't think that they had a real championship upside. They did not make my contender list. I had 11 teams in the contender list. I had 4 top tier contenders, and I had 7 like if things go right contenders. The Warriors were not on that list for me. I had them as a play-in team. Now I actually think that they have a shot, if they hit on a deal, to enter into that puncher's chance tier, to enter into that top 11, because they have the resources to make a deal and their floor is so high that I don't worry about them as a regular season team. Like I would have thought coming into the season, they would have been fighting for the 9 or 10 seed all season. As long as Steph doesn't miss too much time, I think they'll be in that 5-6 range. Because they just have such a high floor with how much depth of talent in their organizational excellence. Again, that organizational excellence, we were talking about this with the Lakers. They win margins. They know how to win basketball games institutionally. And that is what creates that margin for them. There's personnel limitations there. Looney got his butt kicked by Zubac last night, right? Like, Kuminga still is super inconsistent up and down. There are personnel weaknesses there. But there are personal weaknesses that can be addressed, and there's such a depth of quality role player talent on there that it raises their floor to the point where I think that they're a little bit more of a threat. So again, as long as they can hit on a deal, I think they can enter into that tier with like Memphis and the Lakers and the Suns and all those teams that are kind of like middle of the pack Western Conference teams. That was not something that I thought going into the season. Stock falling, the Sacramento Kings. I've watched both of their games so far, and everything comes down to consistency. Third quarter against the Lakers was a thing of beauty defensively. Great ball pressure. They're disrupting LA's offensive flow and keeping them out of their sets until late in the shot clock. Great rotations. No one's open for very long. Active hands. They're forcing deflections, getting great contests on three-point shooters. They held the Lakers to 82.1 offensive rating in that third quarter while getting out in transition, while scoring. They were just cooking the Lakers the way that they always have over the course of the last few years. Then in the fourth quarter, it just is a completely different basketball team. They give up a 157 offensive rating to the Lakers. Now, obviously, there is a LeBron flurry in there, but for the entire quarter, they could not get a stop. There was no ball pressure. Their back line was super disjointed, and LeBron was picking them apart as a passer, just like beating every single help with just like a head fake. The same exact thing happened in Minnesota too. Like, they defended well, they take a lead, they let their foot off the gas, Minnesota get back into it. They take a lead, Minnesota get back into it. They take a lead, Minnesota get back into it. Then all of a sudden you're in a crunch time game and Anthony Edwards hits a jump shot, draws a foul, and you lose. And like that's the thing. It's like I've never seen a team like this where like when they're good, they look so good. But then they can look like legitimately like basement of the Western Conference bad at other times. It's a really bizarre kind of feeling around this team. But again, only 2 games. Want to give it some time. You're also fitting in a new piece. The only other thing that really stood out to me is they're very small. Like, Julius Randle just had a size mismatch, basically regardless of who was guarding him in that first game of the season. That is a legitimate personnel weakness. They are very, very small on the perimeter compared to their peers in the conference. Stock rising, the Orlando Magic. Your top 5 jump shooting team of the early part of the season, Orlando Magic. Once again, very small sample size. 1.1 points per jump shot so far. That's 5th in the NBA. Remember, they were below 1 point per attempt last year, ranked 24th in the NBA. Paolo and Franz are shooting a combined 16 for 36 from 3. Franz is like lighting up the nets. He's hit 10 threes already. Remember how poorly he shot last year? That was such a huge, important thing for him to work on this summer. Jalen Suggs is shooting great. Gary Harris is shooting great. And all of this is before Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has really even found his groove yet. The defense looks great too. They did a number to Jimmy Butler on opening night. They're 5th in defense and 6th in rebounding so far. They just ran into a buzzsaw in Memphis, the Jay Huff game. Jay Huff played so well in that game, he got a new deal out of it the very next day. So, like, by the way, that's something that's going to happen a lot in the NBA this year because there's so many good teams. Like, there's 20 good teams, right? Like, there's roughly 13 of them out west, and there's roughly 7 of them out east. And, like, anytime they run into each other, the home team is going to have a legitimate chance to win, even if they have a talent deficiency. Memphis is really, really damn good. And Memphis might even be more talented than Orlando. They've got some really good shot creators off the top. That's just the NBA this year. We're going to see a lot of teams go on the road and lose games to what we think are mediocre teams because the middle tier in the NBA is so good this year. One more quick one, and then we're done. Stock rising, the Dallas Mavericks. Yes, they lost to the Suns. Guess what? It's going to be hard to win in Phoenix. I think the Lakers are a better basketball team than Phoenix. I think that Phoenix should be favored tonight. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Phoenix beat the Lakers tonight for the exact same reason I was just talking about with the Magic in Memphis. Like, it is hard in the NBA to win on the road. So, Jason, they lose to the Spurs, or they beat the Spurs and they lose to the Phoenix Suns. Why are you so optimistic about Dallas? It's the style of offense that has me excited. And they're still adopting it. Like, this is going to take time. They haven't even statistically produced offensively yet the way they're capable of. Same thing happened to the Lakers last year. The Lakers, remember, 2 years ago, they were a 4-out, 1-in brute force offense, very similar to what the Mavs were last year. Then at the start of the year, they went 5-out. It was super clunky. It took them a long time, but they hit their gear in January, and suddenly it was like a completely different team. Every LeBron offense had been bad since he came to the Lakers because they were so heavy on defensive personnel, and suddenly they had one of the best offenses in the league when everything clicked into place. That's the type of investment Dallas is making. We are looking at the big picture here. I had a lot of Mavs fans, they're playing the same way that they did last. It was the same stuff we ran with Tim Hardaway Jr. No, it's not. It's not. I've watched both teams very closely. You're doing a lot more action, a lot more involvement of all your stars, a lot more ball and player movement, a lot more having your center at the top of the key operating as a passing fulcrum with off-ball action happening around them. That is a different offense than what you ran last year. It's a great thing. It's going to take time. They're going to have to figure shit out. They're going to have bad games. They're going to have nights where they miss a lot of shots. They're going to have nights where there's turnovers. They're going to have nights where it looks clunky. But in the long run, that is an investment that will pay off for Dallas because that is the variety that will make them more resilient offensively when they get into the postseason. All right, guys, let's get into our film session for today. Again, I've got 18 clips for you. We're going to be bouncing around to a bunch of teams around the league. All right, our first one here. This is a great example of off-ball action that doesn't necessarily result in an assist, but that it results in an advantage that still ends in a bucket. So as you can see, our setup here, we have Trayce Jackson-Davis in the post against Zubac. We're going to get a split cut here. What that means is Kuminga is going to set a screen for Steph to come off, and then he's going to cut off of it. So as you watch, because he sets this off-ball screen, Kuminga's looked off now. This action is useless now because Kuminga's now looking, Trayce Jackson-Davis is now looking to score. So Trayce Jackson-Davis has taken his eye off this action. He's looking to score. But just because you ran the action, Kevin Porter Jr. stepped out on Steph to help. That means Jonathan Kuminga has a free crash to the rim on what would have been his cut had it been a more traditional post-up, had Trayce been looking to pass the basketball. Instead, Trayce looks to shoot, and he misses. But Kuminga's got a straight runway to the rim for a tip dunk, literally stemming off of this off-ball action with Steph that drew 2 to the ball. So once again, part of the gravity that Steph has, but 2, that's why off-ball action is so important. It extends beyond spacing, even to offensive rebounding. Just anything you can do to get the defense in rotation. Really good defensive possession for the Clippers here. I've talked a lot about how the Clippers just have so much speed on the perimeter. Watch this speed. So we got Buddy Hield sprinting up the floor. Watch the transition defense. Stop the ball. Turn him to the sideline. We got to close out. We need to close out here. James Harden, close out sharp. Kevin Porter Jr. stays attached to Buddy Hield after he gives up the ball. A lot of guys, they'll pass, boom, and then Kevin Porter will, a lot of guys in this position will relax, and then the shooter will relocate and get open. No, Kevin Porter's staying attached. Where Kevin Porter's denying the ball now. We're swinging the ball to across the court. Look at the closeout from Terrence Mann. He's there on the catch. Kevin Porter's there on the catch. They're flying around and making sure none of these openings are there. switching off the ball to take over an opening, another switch off the ball, good communication. Kevin Porter stays attached on the cut. Now all of a sudden there's 5 seconds on the shot clock and no one's open. Now Steph has to throw up a prayer. Notice off ball too, Derrick Jones Jr. Let's rewind a little bit. Watch Derrick Jones stay disciplined, stays attached. No openings. Really, really good defense from the Clippers. They look so sharp defensively on the perimeter to start the year. This is a really good example of beating what's called strong side zone. So basically, when you have a player do what James Harden does here, which is like, this is the strong side of the floor, right? This is where the ball is. James Harden is straight up ignoring his man to zone up, meaning he's basically just guarding this entire area of the floor as a third defender. And Steph beats it by hitting Gary Payton, just cutting along the baseline. Really nice work from the Warriors to beat a strong side zone. I thought this was a really nice low man rotation from James Harden that I wanted to shout out. You could tell that they're putting him in low man situations a lot to try to keep him engaged off the ball. He had a couple ugly ones, like he had a possession where he let Andrew Wiggins just jog right along the baseline and get over here and hit a three. But for the most part, he's been pretty good here at just playing good help defense. And again, all it is about reading the play. He's the low man. He's not too worried about Gary Payton taking a jumper. So he had a ball screen. Kai Jones comes up to the level. If Kai Jones comes up to the level, there's a pocket pass here. But notice how James Harden identifies it. He's running right now. He's going to start running right now. He sees the screen coming. He sees Kai up at the level. James is making his rotation right away, and he gets in there and knocks the ball away and gets a steal. Really nice low man defense from James Harden. There's another level to a low man rotation, though. So watch as Steph is pointing to Buddy Hield to be the low man in this rotation. Buddy makes the rotation as the low man over, but then Steph makes what I call a windshield wiper rotation, meaning basically as Buddy's rotating, he's rotating. If Buddy helps, Chris Dunn is wide open, right? But Steph makes the rotation too and gets into that baseline passing lane. So now watch Buddy and Steph again, full speed. From here, there's your shooters on the weak side. They're switching because there's an interchange, right? So there's your interchange switch. But then low man, rotation, steal. Nice work from Steph. This was a fun example of like you can tell something that Golden State has practiced a lot, which is double teaming and rotating out of it. But the specific thing I think is really smart here is how quickly they get out of the double team. So Amir Coffey sets a screen. Steph is on the ball. They don't want Steph to be in a switch with James Harden. James Harden's been cooking smaller guards on switches a lot this season. It's been something he's been targeting a lot. So Andrew Wiggins comes up in double teams. Hard double. Kuminga rotates up, so now the only pass that's open is the skip pass to Dunn. But on the double team, as soon as James Harden picks up his dribble, boom. As soon as James Harden picks up his dribble, he's no longer a threat, right? Still a threat, not a threat. Notice how Steph immediately, when James picks up his dribble, starts making his rotation. I'm going to slow it down again. Watch Steph. He's watching James. Threat. Pick up the dribble, not a threat. Rotate back. Boom. Kuminga shoots up the line. Steph rotates down, waves Podziemski in. Now he's back on Derrick Jones Jr. Advantage is gone. That is a beautiful example of the proper way to double team and help a star that's or one of your weaker defensive players that's in a disadvantageous position. Again, pressure, push out. As soon as he picks up his dribble, immediately start your rotation. It's like a pre-rotation, if that makes sense. This next stretch is the incredibly damaging stretch of basketball from Pat Connaughton in the Brooklyn Nets game. And this is all in reverse order because I ended up going back and adding the other clips. So these actually happened in reverse order in the game, but these are the mistakes that he made. This one was one of the weirder plays I've seen. So it's a long rebound. That's Pat Connaughton's ball, right? Dennis Schroeder's running in. That's Pat Connaughton's ball, right? Like he should get that. Doesn't get it. And then whacks Dennis Schroeder in the face and commits a flagrant foul. So instead of getting the defensive rebound and going the other way, the Nets get 2 free throws and possession of the ball. That was really damaging. This was a point of attack defense possession on Cam Thomas that I didn't like. I just thought he was way too passive. So as we fast forward here, we go to Cam Thomas. There's no pressure. We're sitting off and letting Cam get comfortable. which allows Cam to just easily come off of this screen into this area and shoot an easy pull-up three over the top. You have to, with these really good pull-up shooters, disrupt their handle, disrupt their pocket, disrupt their base. You've got to be more physical and apply more ball pressure. That's just not good defense. And then this next one here against Dennis Schroeder, it's just clear the side, get the matchup they want. Okay, we like Pat Connaughton against Schroeder. I'm just going to beat him off the dribble and get to the basket and draw an easy foul. And just like that, like it was like one after the other. It was just such a bad shift for that Bucks bench unit to start the fourth quarter, and they completely lost control of the game. So then Dame comes in, right? See, it's 4-point game, right? 4-point game. This game is hold on. This is one more Connaughton play. The Dame one is next. I apologize. So this is no man's land from Pat. So this is again, I had him in reverse order. So this was early at the start of this run. It was a 4-point game. And by the time all four of these defensive mistakes from Connaughton happen, it's a 12-point game. That's how quickly things turned around. Look at this weak side defense. Who's Pat guarding? Like, he's not low man, but Bobby's the low man. So he's got to be over here. But he's caught in no man's land. This is like that limbo we talk about all the time. This is help defense limbo. You're not helping on the ball, and you're not helping off the ball. Easy kick out pass for Schroeder. It's bad closeout, gives up middle penetration. He gets all the way to the basket for a layup. Just really rough defensive shift. So now Dame comes back in the game. You're trying to regain control. Dame is guarding here in the corner. Watch the corner crash. Cam Thomas takes, I think, a pull-up three here. He takes a short jump shot, but look at Dame. Well, like, what's Dame doing? You're not helping. You're not tracking your man. Just goes right behind him for an easy tip dunk. Like, the Bucks are going to just keep getting kicked around by these young teams on these nights when they don't engage defensively. Like that, you've got to be sharper because you're not as athletic. If you're not as you can't be the worst execution team and the worst athleticism team. You're going to get beat a lot if you play that way. Here's that incredible stretch of offensive basketball from the Boston Celtics at the tail end of the Pistons game. Here's the inside seal from Tatum to Al Horford. Real basic action to beat switching, right? Here comes Horford. We're expecting a switch, so he wants to screen the bottom side. Kind of gets that inside 45-degree angle. Creates inside seal. Tatum just throws the easy pass over the top. That forces the help from the weak side. Now we have our weak side 2-on-1. And remember, that's the foundation of everything that makes Boston great. If they can create these weak side 2-on-1s, they're just always wide open threes for really good shooters. Drew Holiday hits the three. This transition kick-out pass from Jaylen Brown was ridiculous. Get the rebound. Watch Jaylen Brown's push here in transition. Nasty behind the back move. Gets into the paint. Draws three bodies. Kick out to Al Horford. Pass, rotate. Easy, wide open three for Drew Holiday. Boom, game's tied. Here's that top lock play I was talking about. So, again, they're setting up off-ball action, but Tim Hardaway Jr. is playing way on the high side. This is called top locking. He's trying to stop Tatum from flashing high to go get the basketball off of a Horford screen. But Tatum smartly just cuts out of it and gets really good post position out of it. See, because Hardaway was basically conceding that inside cut. Tatum gets an easy layup. That's bad defense, but also just a really nice counter to a coverage from Jayson Tatum. And then this was just insane. A back screen gets Cade Cunningham wide open. You think you're dead to rights. Watch this block from Derek White. That is in a 2-point game with less than a minute left. That is a winning type of play from Derek White that stopped the Pistons from tying that game. And then Jayson Tatum goes down and ices it on the other end. All right, last before we get out of here, let's talk about these inverted ball screens with Evan Mobley. This first one here, again, notice the defender here, Jalen Duren's going way underneath the pick. Because he's going under the pick, Evan Mobley can easily set into his pull-up three off the dribble, which he's been shooting well to start this year. The second one, he's going to draw two on the ball. So once again, Duren's on the ball. When Mitch sets the screen, he draws the help, because this guy's just thinking, I've got to be there, otherwise Mobley's going to get downhill. That allows Mitchell this wide open closeout at the top of the key and gets all the way to the rim for a layup. Here again, if you have another way to get the defense in rotation, that's a huge advantage, because certain matchups might swing in each, depending on who you're playing, where those advantages are harder to come by. And if you have more ways to generate advantages, it makes for a more resilient offense. Having Evan Mobley also be able to generate advantage makes your offense more resilient. This is why I've been harping on it with the Dallas Mavericks and their playing style. You want to have more people involved so that you have more resilience on the offensive end of the floor. Last one. This is where you see that runway that I talk about. Fast forward a little bit. When Mobley gets the screen, notice the defender, Tobias Harris in this case, goes under. Because Tobias goes under, now we've got a solid 7 or 8 foot gap here that allows Mobley to get ahead of steam. When he gets ahead of steam, by the time he drops that shoulder, now look where he is. He's 8 feet from the basket. And then he can just turn easily over his left shoulder for a short range hook shot. He's able to get, I'm going to watch it. I want you guys to watch it full speed again. Look at how easily he can get downhill because the defender goes under the pick from that 2-man game where he's inverting it. It's a nice little wrinkle in the Cavs offense to start this year. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show. I've got a little bit of a crazy day schedule-wise tomorrow, so we're just going to do a really short episode tomorrow morning, but then we'll be back with a bunch of breakdowns on Wednesday. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show, and I'll see you then.